I know. Some of you had posted in the comments of some of the other scouting reports I had done so far. Some of you had sit there, I see, posted on Twitter and been talking about, like, Matt Corral. When are you going to talk about Matt Corral? We need a scouting report on Matt Corral. Like, I see so much talk about Matt Corral. I would have thought that he was, like, that dude. I would have thought that he was fucking obvious QB1. Like, fascinating to me that an average-ish prospect right now is getting so many people asking so many questions about him. I'm just keeping it real, folks. Like, it seems like a lot of people, like, I don't know if it's SEC brainwashing and ball washing. I don't know if it's just like he's a more prominent name, apparently. I don't know what it is. But you have to look past that stuff, and you have to look deeper, and you have to actually get to brass tacks and look at the quarterback, look at the prospect, look what you see. And I would certainly agree, like, there are some appealing traits. I would certainly agree, like, there is upside there. I also would certainly agree that I think he will improve and grow in 2021. But I would also certainly agree with anybody that has a notion that this dude is not a first-round talent right now, that this dude needs quite a bit of work, that this dude is probably getting overrated because of his profile and because of the conference he plays in the SEC, and the hype doesn't match the reality. I certainly would agree with that. You know, sorry, not sorry. I mean, I'm not going to say he had a bad year. He played a full season and went over 70% in terms of his completion percentage and threw for over 3,300 yards, and that's only in 10 games. Threw for 29 touchdown passes. Even when you talk about the piece with the interceptions, he had 14 of them, which is pretty high, especially relative to some of his peers that he'd be competing against. But, I think it was, what was the games I watched? I believe it was the Arkansas and LSU games that were really bad in terms of the turnover numbers. Like, he had 5 or 6 in one and 5 in the other. So those two really bad games, those two really bad performances led to the majority of the turnovers. So the context matters. But he is a legit dual-threat quarterback in this draft class. Ran for over 500 yards last year, a few rushing touchdowns. So when you talk about the mold of the modern NFL quarterback, you're looking for those guys that can beat you with their legs as well as their arms. Well, Matt Corral can certainly do enough with his legs. Now, I will say in terms of his biggest strengths, I don't think he's a great athlete. I think he's a better functional runner in terms of his movement skills and his ability to run than he is from, like, a pure athlete. Like, he's not explosive, he's not fast, he's not uber quick, anything like that, but he's got enough movement ability, he's got enough agility, runs hard. So while he's not, like, a top-notch athlete, I certainly wouldn't compare him in terms of athleticism in this class to somebody like a Malik Willis or something like that. Like, he can make enough plays happen with his feet. I think if you're looking to be that type of dual-threat runner at the next level, you're probably, sadly, mistaking yourself a little bit. He does show the ability to improvise and make plays when the structure breaks down around him, which is something important that you seek out for a young quarterback when talking about the NFL, as the structure's not always going to be there. You want those guys that can improvise. You want those guys that can go to, be moved off their original spot and then reset, redirect, and still make things happen. He's got a nice ability to move within the pocket and buy extra time. When you talk about kind of that poise and pocket presence and awareness and, not just running into the pressure all the time. Like, I like his ability to work up and around in the pocket. He also shows a nice ability to go through his progressions. Like, for a guy that runs this much, a lot of times you look at a guy that runs this much and you say, well, that's probably because they're a one-read guy and it's 1, 2, 3. If that first read ain't open, they're taken off. And that's not necessarily the case here with Matt Corral. He does show the ability to go through his progression. Sure, he could be quicker about it. He could do it more consistently. He could be better about it. But at least I see some of that potential. I see some of that show up in his game in 2020. He also flashes the ability to throw with touch and feel. And not every ball needs to be a rocket ball. Not every ball, needs to have the same type of trajectory or same type of arc on it. He shows that ability to kind of mix up his throws. Shows enough arm strength to make most throws. Like, this might be a matter of perspective. Like, I don't think he has a hose. I don't think he has a noodle arm either. Like, his arm strength is probably average to slightly above average, and that's about it. So it makes it a bit of a strength, but it's not a raging strength. He's not, when you talk about a 6'1", 205-pound quarterback, you'd like him to have a stronger arm than what he actually has here. But he has enough. Just like he has enough. Like, that's the way I can say a lot about his game. Like, he has enough. Well, when you start talking about taking guys in the first round, you start talking about taking them in the top half of round 1, top 10, top 5, maybe top 1, 2, 3. You don't want guys that just have enough. You want them to have a lot of stuff. You want them to have great, elite special traits, and Matt Corral just simply does not have them. But he certainly has some weaknesses. He makes some really bad gunslinger decisions that lead to a lot of turnovers, evidenced by the 14 interceptions. He shows some real problems reading and understanding zone defenses. Like, several times he got picked off because he got so focused on just the target that he was throwing at that he missed the defender that was literally standing like 5 or 10 yards down the field right in front of him. You're looking at him like, how in the fuck did you miss that? It's not like the defense did anything exotic. It's not like the defense did anything special to disguise their coverage or anything. I mean, he literally just threw it right to guys that were playing underneath in zone coverage. That's really bad. His throwing mechanics need a bit of work. His lower body's not in sync with his upper body. He's got a hitch in his arm motion, which leads to an elongated release, like this weird kind of thing where, again, he kind of pulls back. Not so bad as, let's say, a Jamie Newman, who ended up going undrafted in this 2021 draft class, but he's all out of sorts in terms of the harmony and synchronicity of his upper and lower body. He's got a little extra hitch, which is going to lead to lengthening of his release time, which is going to take away some throwing windows, especially when he doesn't have the greatest arm strength as it is. Sometimes he's too quick to bail out of the pocket. I did mention that I like his ability to move within the pocket and buy extra time, both in and outside of the pocket. But there are times that the pressure starts coming and he's just in a hurry to get the fuck out of Dodge. His velocity is really hit and miss in short and intermediate areas. I think some of that is due to the mechanical things. So if you work on some of the mechanical things, like, you'll see an uptick in some of the zip and the velocity on his ball. But you could see a guy that in the short and intermediate area, especially with some of the outs that he would throw, that if his timing wasn't perfect, his velocity's not great, he's going to be a pick 6 potential machine if you're not careful, both even at Ole Miss now and especially once he would get to the NFL level. And I also look at him and I say his completion percentage is inflated by his system because his ball placement is really shaky at times. Like, I was looking, when you see a guy complete 70% of his passes, system or not, you're expecting there to at least be a decent baseline of accuracy and ball placement, and his was kind of lacking, admittedly. Like, I thought it was going to be better than it actually was. He wasn't horrendous, but yeah, ball placement, shaky. Guys that are open, he's throwing behind them. Guys that are running in stride, and he would throw it low where they have to go down and get it. So accurate in terms of general area, but the ball placement is far from ideal. So when I look at his strengths and I look at his weaknesses, I'm just really trying to understand why I see people like really high on him or see what they're really hyped up about. You know, and yeah, obviously, you're talking about, well, now you go into 2021, you got another season of development. He could grow and work on these things. 2020 was kind of a unique special snowflake because you didn't get a lot of off-season work time. And I grant you all of that, and all of that is very true. But you know, you still should see enough in terms of when the games actually happen. You should see the traits. The traits should stand out, both the positive and the negative, to give you some type of idea of the level of prospect that you're talking about here. Now, Matt Corral is certainly a draftable prospect. I think he's got enough arm strength. He's got enough athleticism. Shows enough ability to improvise when the initial structure breaks down. He has enough ability that he's flashed to throw with touch and feel. But he's not a game breaker as a runner. He's not a game breaker in terms of his arm strength as a passer, and especially down the field. Some of his deep throws have to get a lot of air under them. His mechanics need quite a bit of work. Yeah, I just look at him and I say, he's the type of guy that those enough traits in college can come across a whole lot better than they actually are. Now, is he the type of guy that could go out there in an Ole Miss offense in 2021, have some pieces around him, and put up big numbers, and you see him go from being like a mid-round talent to being a first-round type of guy? Certainly could. But I wouldn't count on it right now. Like, I've got a mid-round grade on him. When I watch Matt Corral, I see more long-term NFL backup than I do long-term or high-end NFL starter. And when you talk about guys like that, you really shouldn't be taking those guys any earlier than the 4th round. And that's what his skills and his traits are showing me right now. So rage at me if you want, but that's how I see it. A lot could change as we get to the 2021 season, but right now, I'm sorry, I just don't see it with Matt Corral.